Speakers. So first off this afternoon, we have Maree Adshead from the CEO of Eco Markets Australia. So the Maree's is the CEO. It's the country's first independent administrator of environmental markets and the current administrator of the Reef Credit Scheme. And it's exploring new opportunities to administer in biodiversity and nature positive markets. So Maree was previously in Queensland's inaugural Small Business Commissioner, advocating for the needs and priorities of small business operators and providing vital support to more than 6,500 impacted businesses across Queensland during the COVID-19 pandemic. And Marie's going to be talking to us about how we understand a voluntary market platform for participation. So thanks very much, Maree.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks very much for having me. Looked through the program that for those of you that have been lucky enough to be on board the whole time and with much envy because it looked like a fantastic forum. I hope you're picking up lots of incredible information. What I'm going to be talking about is our lived experience as an administrator of an environmental market. And I'm very happy to share our practical learnings and what's going well and where we've had to work on some areas as well, because we're certainly getting all sorts of interesting feedback. So I thought I'd start, if you could just quickly move over to the next slide, please. A little bit about who we are, in case you've not come across us before, and that's very possible if you're not based in Queensland or you're not based in the reef catchment of the Great Barrier Reef. So, but hopefully this has still got some relevance for the rest of you as well, and I'll talk about why we're hoping for that to be important to you shortly. So this is who we are. We're a not-for-profit independent organisation. We were founded in 2020. The Reef Credit Scheme itself has got a little bit more longevity than that. The pilot projects were registered under the Reef Credit Scheme in 2017, and the first credits were issued in 2019. So we've got some years where we've learned some things that we're certainly I'm happy to share with you today. Like all environmental markets schemes, it involves a standard and methodology. So we're involved in the implementation of the standard side of things and approving those methodologies, which are the accounting methodologies that we work on to ensure that they are robust and science-based. We issue credits under the scheme that we operate at the moment, the Reef Credit Scheme, and we also keep those credits on a public-facing register where people can see those credits that have been issued, see where they've been transferred and retired. What we don't do is we don't develop those projects ourselves. We are completely independent from the process, and we don't write those methodologies either. We run the approval process. We're based in Brisbane. We do have a staff member in Townsville in the heart of the Great Barrier Reef catchment. Next slide, please. Because carbon and nature or biodiversity markets are producing a far less tangible commodity than traditional commodity markets, it's just so important that there is that trust and confidence that for both the participants that are generating reef credits or environmental credits and those that are investing and purchasing those. So these are the principles that underpin the Reef Credit Scheme and will underpin any market that we administer. And we work very hard to ensure that the integrity and in our market and the confidence by those that participate in our market is utmost and up to global best practice standards. And so to do that, we are regularly finding anything that we can get our hands on to evaluate our processes against. So we recently looked at the pollination integrity framework and evaluated the Reef Credit Scheme against that, finding encouragingly that we were adhering to at least best practice and beyond, and exceeding beyond in many instances, which was really good for us to know, because we're learning and trying to make this as constantly improve. And the other thing we did was we looked at the Australian independent review of the Australian carbon market by Professor Ian Chubb, and worked out what we can learn from those that experience as well, and to make sure that we're constantly sitting at the very best that we can be in terms of market integrity. Next slide, please. So, there were some built-in bits there I didn't factor in. Why is a water quality market important? So the reef credit scheme is obviously all about water quality, like the carbon market, which is an air quality market. We're about reducing pollutant. In the case of the reef credit scheme, it's tied to the Reef 2050 targets that were agreed to by the Queensland and Australian government around nitrogen sediment reduction as being the second biggest threat to the health of the Great Barrier Reef after climate change. It's been estimated that there is a $7 billion funding gap in order to achieve the 2050 reef targets. And where's that money going to come from? Well, that's why market mechanisms like ours were set in play, so that there is a way to channel private investment to help support that funding gap to achieve the work that's got to happen in order to address those targets. And I would also like to acknowledge some fellow NRMs that have been involved in the foundation of the Reef Credit Scheme. We've got Terrain NRM, who you're about to hear from, Bronwyn, as our another speaker in this session, NQ Dry Tropics NRM, and also, of course, acknowledge the support of the Queensland Government, its role in the foundation of the Reef Credit Scheme, and Green Collar, who was who you're about to hear from as well, who was one of the is one of our major project proponents and authors of some of our methodologies. So next slide, please. So under our scheme, our projects generate a tradable unit of pollutant reduction that is called a reef credit. A reef credit is either dissolved in organic nitrogen or fine soil sediment, and that's the measure there. It's a kilogram of dissolved in organic nitrogen or 538 kilograms of fine soil sediment. We've generated under our scheme more than 46,000 reef credits that have been issued in those 6 years of operating, and most of those, if not almost all of those credits, have now been sold via our registry by the project proponents. Which is a lot of kilograms. Thanks. A lot. No, you're right. You can go to the next slide. Which is a lot of kilograms of those pollutants that we've saved. What I wanted to just quickly touch on is the methodologies that are applying under the Reef Credit Scheme, and these will be similar to any environmental market where you've got your scheme and the methodologies being the process to follow in order to account for those outcomes that you're measuring under your scheme. In the case of the Reef Credit Scheme, we have those 3 methodologies as approved methodologies, and we've got 2 under review at the moment. We're very excited about those. We want to see more methodologies, the more the better, because it does create many more pathways for project proponents and landholders to participate and generate revenue from the practice changes that they're introducing on their property. So we're very excited about those 2, and I'll touch on those in a moment. But basically on the right-hand side of the screen there, we've tried to cut down for you the differences so you can kind of see at a glance what pollutant that each methodology is targeting. That you will see that there's different crediting periods for those, and they're triggered. An issuance of credits are triggered by different things. So in the nitrogen use efficiency methodology, it's a 10-year crediting project, and the credits are issued every 12 months. And for the gully method, we don't have any projects under the gully method yet. That's about a sediment save methodology. It's got a 25-year crediting period, much longer, more similar to a carbon that you might be used to, and it's triggered by rainfall events. Wastewater method is a bit different. That's our newest methodology. That's an algae bioremediation methodology. It is also about dissolved in organic nitrogen as its target pollutant that it's addressing. Interestingly, the crediting period, the crediting period is 15 years, but it is under that methodology, credits are issued every quarter, which is incredibly frequent. We only have the one project under the wastewater method at the moment. It's about to be registered in the next, hopefully, couple of days. It's a sewage treatment plant in the Burdekin. And then those other 2 draft methodologies at the moment that are working through our process that we're hoping, particularly the grazing land management method, that's going to create a lot of opportunity, particularly for stacking credits. And I'm happy to talk about that in a moment. Next slide, thanks. If you're familiar with how a carbon project works, this is not going to look terribly different. And I imagine all environmental projects are going to follow a very, very similar pathway. There's a obviously a landholder and a project proponent work out viability and make their assessments based on the property and where it is and what you can participate in. There's a process where you obviously need to register that project. You go about the project, start collecting your data and doing the things that you're supposed to do in accordance with the methodology, produce those computations based on the methodology, which is then assessed independently by an assurance auditor or verifier. We then check all of those things and say, yep, you've done all the things you said you were going to do, you've achieved all the outcomes you said you were going to achieve, or if you haven't, those adjustments are made. We then issue the reef credit on our registry, and either it's sold to another registry account holder to do what they wish to do with it, or it's retired so that that environmental outcome can be claimed. I think there might be some embedded bits in this one, but yeah, sorry. Just quickly whiz through that one. Excellent. The other thing I was keen to talk about today is what we're seeing in this real shift in the conversation away from, well, it's not away from, but it's adding to the conversation around decarbonisation, and net zero is now this shift to uplift in nature. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about this over the last day and a half. And some of the other speakers this afternoon will very probably talk about this as well. We were at Beef Week last week in Rockhampton. It's an event that's on every 3 years. And 3 years ago, this was not even part of the conversation. But this year, everybody wanted to talk about soil carbon. We're anticipating soil carbon was the number one conversation. We're anticipating by the time Beef Week rolls around for 2027, it's all going to be about co-benefiting and stacking with nature positive or biodiversity outcomes. And there's a number of drivers for this. It's, the science tells us that carbon or CO2 is harmful to our atmosphere, which is leading to climate change, which has led to the Paris Agreement, which Australia is a signatory to and is on its decarbonisation pathway. And now the science will, for some time, we're awakening to science, obviously letting us know very clearly that nature's in decline. And linked to that, we now have targets to halt and reverse nature loss through the Global Biodiversity Framework, and that's flowing into reporting frameworks like I've flagged there, the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, which is all about helping companies assess their nature-related risks and impacts, and that includes reporting. And that's bringing a much sharper focus and curiosity on the nature and biodiversity markets. Next slide. Hoping this one's going to really help map out where all these markets exist, because this was something we were grappling with ourselves. So we created this to try and get our minds around where we belong as a water quality market and where we sit alongside biodiversity or nature markets or nature repair, which I know those of you that listened in yesterday would have heard about from Catherine at DQ, the emerging nature repair market. And then, of course, how does it sit with carbon? So as I mentioned before, on the left-hand side, you've got your carbon market, which is all about the pollutant greenhouse gases, and it's focusing on cleaner air. You've got on the far right, you've got the water market, water quality market, like the Reef Credit Scheme, which is focusing also on reducing a pollutant. And then in the middle, we've got our halting and reversing nature loss, or creating an uplift in nature condition, and that's your biodiversity market. So hopefully that helps in explaining sort of how the three types of markets sit together and what they're focusing on achieving. But also too, we've got there some of those activities, and we believe very strongly that activities under the carbon market are going to have a way of realising complementary benefits for biodiversity and water quality, and that if there is a way to generate multiple credits on the same parcel of land through complementary activities, then that's going to create a very nice way to minimise risk and the financial risk for those project proponents to be able to participate in those markets together. And one of those ways of doing that is through stacking. So we'll just jump into the next slide and we'll unpack that slightly. This I did not create. This is adopted from pollination. I thought it was a wonderful way of visualising how the different concepts of combining carbon and nature markets or credits can work. And we see this as something that's coming up a lot in conversation with the participants in the reef credit scheme. Everybody wants to know how it works with carbon and land, how landholders can diversify their revenue opportunity and help, I guess, minimise risk in participating in these things by tapping into multiple markets at the same time. So that's something that we're certainly keen to understand. And we think one of the biggest opportunities to do that in our case is for sheep and cattle producers that are carbon farming in the reef catchment. We see our draft, it's not our methodology, as I said, we don't write the methodologies, we just approve them. But in the grazing land management methodology that we are hoping will be approved through our technical processes is going to create a really good opportunity to do that. So if you roll on to the next slide, I've got an example of how that might work. So if you were a soil carbon farmer and you've got a registered project, they're generating ACCUs, all about storing carbon in soil and having those wonderful benefits around soil health. For example, you can see there that the activities that you're doing to generate those ACCUs are very complementary with doing a reef credit project under, as I say, hopefully approved grazing land management methodology. And we're really keen to see that one come online if it passes all of the technical gates, and it might even be as soon as in the next few months. And that's something that we're finding is really exciting. So there you can see that there's an opportunity to generate reef credits as well as your soil carbon, and we've managed to deal with the additionality question because they're completely different outcomes and benefits that are being measured there. It's a really good low barriers to entry methodology to get involved in as well. I'm told it's roughly about $250,000 worth, sorry, $200, not $250,000, $250 worth of some soil sampling and simple activities to commence. So it's actually a really attractive one that we're hoping will get off the ground very, very soon. One of the biggest questions, though, that we're always asked everywhere we go, next slide, please, is who's buying these things and how much are they paying for them? Well, guess what? We don't actually sell reef credits. We are not a financial services provider. We don't sell them. We manage the registry, but the owner of the credit sells those credits. So we rely on the credit owners or the project proponents that have an account in our registry to share with us what they can, because that information is usually commercial in confidence. It's a deal that's struck between, a corporate investor and the person that owns those credits. But we are anecdotally, we've got an average there for the methodology credits that are generated under that nitrogen use efficiency project that we've got, those 12 projects. It's around $100 a credit. And who's buying them? Well, Queensland government is committed to $10 million worth of reef credits, but they're also being invested in by corporate investors such as, in the aircraft operators, banks, and that sort of thing. And we certainly believe demand is going to grow as obligations like the Task Force for Nature-related financial disclosures is starting to become very much on the corporate radar. We haven't had any other credits sold under our other methodologies as yet, but we certainly are very interested in watching this space, because we are seeing that not all credits are created equal, as we're seeing in the carbon market as well, with some of the attributes and depending upon the way that the carbon has been generated. Same for the reef credit scheme. And that makes sense, because if you're going to be generating a reef credit under the nitrogen uptake efficiency method versus, which might be about fertilizer management or other practice change on the farm, that's not costing you as much as, say, building a gully or in the case of our draft wetlands method, building a wetland, it might cost a capital injection of a couple of million. So obviously the reef credits that are being generated under that project, you're going to want a return on that investment. So the credit is absolutely more valuable. So that's one of the things we're learning. We're learning that there are barriers to participation. We've certainly discovered that not all of our, so there are some challenges in some of the subcatchments of the Great Barrier Reef around, for example, our nitrogen uptake efficiency method, which is underpinned by a modelling tool. It has some challenges. So we're working with Queensland Government and the methodology developer, which is Green Collar, about how we can streamline that and really make sure that those barriers to participation, those practical things that might be making a project unviable but shouldn't be, we can fix. We need more methodologies. So I'm really, if you know of anybody that has got a draft methodology that they're wanting to learn more about, turning into a methodology under our scheme, love to know more about that. We think that government can play a really important role here by signalling their confidence in market mechanisms as this way to channel finance to environmental outcomes by reef credits, and that will build confidence in these markets as a viable practice for doing this. And I've mentioned about the variations that we're seeing in reef credits, and the importance of getting really good advice early is something that we're learning from those proponents that have been involved. Is baselining is really critical, and spending the effort and getting that done really well can really pay dividends. But we've also learned that, there's a lot of marine ecosystems around the country that could benefit from a water quality market, not just the Great Barrier Reef. We agree. And that's why we're working closely with our friends at the NRM in Southeast Queensland, Healthy Land and Water, to explore whether or not we can expand the water quality market that we already operate and pick it up and run it in the southeast of Queensland. In fact, anywhere in Australia is something we're very keen to look at. We're also thinking, well, look, how about it's time we apply our experience and our skills and our existing infrastructure to now go into biodiversity and nature markets. And I know that your next speaker, or one of the next speakers, is going to be touching on the cassowary credits, which we're very, very keen to bring all of those integrity measures and mechanisms that we have in the reef credit scheme to apply to make that market absolutely robust and strong. So the next, so one last, I think I've got 2 more slides. I'll be really quick. How can you help? Well, this is a nascent market, and, there's a lot to learn. It's really, I know from my previous role that Rachel mentioned earlier, as any small business operator, and landholders, a lot of landholders are small business operators, navigating this fog is hard. We get a lot of questions from people trying to understand what's right for their land. We're all about encouraging participation in the reef credit scheme or any environmental market, but informed participation. It's got to be right for the landholder. It's got to be right for what they're trying to achieve. And it's got to be, worthwhile, obviously, for all involved. So we see ourselves as the independent regulator as such, that we've got a really important role in helping bridge awareness and increasing knowledge. And we're happy to try and do that as best we can. But we're here to help you guys as well, to help your stakeholders, to help people understand this better. So we would love to hear from any of you about what your your stakeholders are telling you. If there's challenges they've encountered, if there's things that they don't understand, we want to know. So if we can help with that, we'd love to know and hear from you more. So the next slide is just how you can do that. So we have a quarterly newsletter. We run a webinar series. We've just started it. So we've got our first 2 on our website, but, that way you can hear about what we're doing and get involved.